I can control the lifespan of my particles by just checking the checkbox that says delete dead particles. And what's going to happen is if I simulate again now, the particles will be actually simulated as dying after 25 frames plus minus 5. So between 20 and 30, my particles will die, and this is what it looks like. But this is true permanent deletion, and the channels lifespan and age are actually generated always for Stoke, and they're always saved to the PRT files. So I always have them. And that means I can simulate without deleting the particles. That means I have all the particles on the last frame, and at this point I can click this icon here, and it adds two modifiers, one magma select by age, and inside this magma I'm basically saying that the age will be compared to the lifespan, and if it's greater, that means it is beyond the point of death. We're going to convert that greater value, which is 1 in that case, to a float and output a selection. That means we're setting selection of 1 when the particle should be dead and 0 when it shouldn't. And the result is, of course, that this delete modifier on top of the magma is killing the particles exactly like we did before. But this is now not permanent. First, I can disable the delete and I get the whole cloud again. And second, I can modify this. What I can do, for example, is say take this lifespan, and we'll be reordering this automatically, and we'll add to this a new value. And the new value will be a floating point number, but we want it in frames, and currently age is actually handled as seconds in the latest versions of Stoke and Krakatoa. So I'm going to divide this by the number of frames by the FPS. I could use a script to read how many they are, but in this case I'm dividing by 30 because my time settings were set to 30. So I can expose this, and this gives me the number of frames that I'm adding to the lifespan. I mean, to the life expectation. So if I go and say I wanted to live for 10 more frames, I can enter 10 here, and my simulation will be now deleted 10 frames later. If I enter 20, now it will be dying 20 frames later than originally simulated. If I go here and say minus 20, it will kill them very early. So they get born and they're gone. I can do minus 10, and the same thing will happen. They will die after more or less 10 frames, plus minus 5, as it was originally simulated. Or I can multiply this number by a factor and say 2 times more or 0.5 times more and so on, and then the comparison will work differently. So this is a much more flexible approach if you already have Krakatoa, and you don't even need the commercial version of Krakatoa. You can use the evaluation mode just to get the magma. You can do this. And as mentioned, we can actually use frost, for example. I probably should have kept this. I'll keep those modifiers so the deletion is still happening. And with this object selected, I can go and click on the frost icon, and now I have a frost mesh. And of course, I could go and say object properties. I can, for example, display whatever color I have on the particles. Probably shaded will look even better. So currently, the colors that are assigned to the particles are being transferred onto the mesh, and then the mesh is working. That was union of spheres. Jobritzen, of course, will look slightly better, especially if I tweak a little bit the settings. And of course, it is pretty much interactive. So Stoke is yet another way to create things inside of Frost. And if you want to render your particles, you can switch to geometry. You can switch, for example, to boxes. And now, okay, I'll use a little bit smaller boxes probably. But if you don't have Krakatoa for rendering, but to have Frost, for example, you can easily mesh your particles and display them in another renderer like Mentoray and V-Ray and Scanline and so on. If you don't even have Frost, you can still render your particles even without Krakatoa. All you have to do is save those PRT files to disk. You can download, I mean, without Krakatoa license, you can still install Krakatoa in evaluation mode. And you can use the particle flow operators, which allow you to read a PRT file inside of Stoke. You can just click on the icon that I did before, create a PRT loader, and then use the Krakatoa PRT birth and the Krakatoa PRT update. Here it is. You can pick that PRT loader, and you can create your flow where you're assigning your own shapes and all the other logic, but the actual animation will be loaded from Stoke. from the stock files that were written to disk, and then you can render in any geometry renderer like V-Ray, Mentor Ray, and so on without having to render in Krita. Obviously, the amount of particles you'll be simulating will be smaller, but that's another way to use Stoke in your pipeline.